My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 36 years old, and I built a software company in Austin, Texas that is now valued at over $100 million. I started with nothing but an old laptop, a cluttered garage, and sheer determination. For years, I poured everything, my energy, my marriage, my sanity, into building something lasting. I believed it was mine alone. But life has a cruel way of testing you. After 12 years of marriage, my husband walked out on me for another woman. Painful, yes, but survivable. What I never imagined was that he'd come back, hand in hand with his new wife, storming into a high-stakes board meeting where international investors sat waiting and demanding half of everything I had created. They claimed my company was theirs by right. It should have been laughable. Instead, their audacity rattled the room, and for a terrifying moment, I felt the empire I had sacrificed everything for teetering on the edge of collapse. But that was only the beginning, because what started as a bitter divorce soon spiraled into betrayal, sabotage, and even crimes that would make national headlines. And when I thought I had already lost everything, they struck again. This time in a way so shocking, so destructive, it nearly broke me for good. Stay with me, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about power, survival, and revenge. And trust me, you won't want to miss how it ends. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love stories where people refuse to be victims, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. I was born outside Dayton, Ohio, in a ranch house that smelled like coffee, motor oil, and laundry sheets. My dad, Tom Carter, ran a two-bay auto shop with a hand-painted sign that read Carter and Daughter, long before I ever knew how to hold a wrench. He meant it as a joke at first. My mom hung the sign because she said dreaming out loud counts as planning, but the word sank into me like a promise I wasn't sure I wanted. Mom, Janice, was a night shift nurse who kept a spiral notebook of grocery prices in her purse, so she could tell you exactly which week was best to buy chicken and when peanut butter would drop 50 cents. We weren't poor, but we were always counting. Counting tips from Dad's last break job. Counting hours until Mom's shift ended. Counting down school lunches I could stretch with a thermos of store-brand tomato soup. The counting made us practical. It made us quiet. And it made us lean on each other in that Midwestern way, where pride snarls at the throat of asking for help. I had a brother, Aiden, 2 years older and spoiled in ways that never looked like spoiling unless he lived with us. If he wanted a new glove for baseball, Dad found an excuse to test the alignment on someone's car and came home with cash. If I wanted a refurbished laptop from the pawn shop, the answer was after Christmas, honey, or maybe when overtime picks up. No one said they loved Aiden more. They just moved faster when he needed something. They made room. I grew up learning how to make do. When the school's desktop in the library started freezing, I read the manual front to back and fixed it with a paper clip and a prayer. When our internet went out, I sat on the front stoop piggybacking on a neighbor's connection to download a textbook PDF I needed for chemistry. I stripped Dad's junked printers for parts and built a Frankenstein machine that worked well enough to spit out my 8th grade science fair poster. Dad laughed when I showed him the soldering iron burns on my wrists. Carter and Daughter, he said, clapping my shoulder. But the sign over his shop stayed as it was. A joke everyone else found charming and I found heavy. The first time I felt the weight of unfairness like a hand on the back of my neck was sophomore year. The school district announced a tech club competition, a little grant for whichever team built the best tool for local businesses. I pitched an idea to map potholes using students' phones so the city could prioritize repairs. My team built a prototype in 3 weeks using a free API and more ambition than sense. We won, not the whole grant, but honorable mention and a check for $500 to split among the team. I ran home to show Dad the photo in the paper. Me holding a cardboard check, cheeks red with winter wind, grinning like I'd swallowed a star. Aiden was at the table polishing his cleats. Without looking up, he said, $500 won't get you into MIT. Mom shushed him automatically, but Dad said, your sister's got a point to prove. College money is for both of you. Don't spend that on junk. He ruffled Aiden's hair. Big game Friday, champ. $500. It wasn't junk to me. It was parts, software licenses, entry fees. But the message was clear, my wins were cute. His were destiny. The quiet injuries accumulated. On my 17th birthday, Mom mixed a cake from a box and slid 18 candles into the frosting because she couldn't find the right number. Close enough, she said, tired and smiling, then rushed to iron Aiden's shirt because the baseball recruiter from Bowling Green was coming to watch him play. We'll do your college visits in the spring, she promised me. We'll make a whole trip to look at good public schools with strong comp sci programs. In the spring, the minivan broke down and the trip got canceled. After baseball season, Dad said, and by then the applications had passed. I learned not to ask twice. At school, I found a refuge in a computer lab and a guidance counselor who cared. Mrs. Levy had silver hair, red ballet flats, and a habit of underlining things with a felt-tip pen, so the ink bled through the paper. You think in systems, Rachel, she told me. Don't apologize for seeing the whole board. She handed me a flyer for an online coding boot camp with a scholarship program. Try, she said. Worst case, you're exactly where you are now. I got the scholarship. I took a bus to Sinclair Community College for evening classes while finishing high school. When I came home at 10, there were pizza boxes on the counter from Aiden's teammates and a stack of dishes soaking in the sink. Mom would be on the sofa, shoes off, ankles swollen. I'd tell her about learning Python list comprehensions and she'd smile drowsily, saying, "You're going to build something that saves me time at the hospital." One February night, Dad left a notice from the bank on the table. Winter is hard for auto shops. Taxes are harder. He didn't talk to me about it, but I saw the numbers and my stomach clenched. The next morning, I printed flyers offering to build basic business websites for local shops. $50 for a landing page, $75 if they wanted a contact form that actually worked. I taped the flyers to cork boards at the donut shop, the barber, the laundromat. A week later, Mrs. Simon from the consignment store called and asked if I could make something that let customers reserve items. I said yes, and then spent 3 nights teaching myself how. Those small jobs stacked like bricks. The first check I brought home, $75 paid in cash, tight rubber band around it. Dad frowned. "I don't want you doing that instead of school," he said. "It's for school," I said. "Everything is for school." He nodded, unconvinced, then asked if I could help him post coupons for oil changes on Facebook. I showed him how to schedule posts and watched his eyes go soft with pride he wouldn't name. When Aiden tore his ACL during the regional semifinal, the household tilted. The doctor's voice was grave. The recovery long. The scholarship likely gone. Mom started speaking in whispers, as if loud noises might further injure his knee. Dad stayed late at the shop and came home with grease drying in black crescents under his nails. He sat in the dark kitchen, counting without a notebook, and I knew what he was adding up. Physical therapy copays, tuition at a state school without athletic money, the minivan's failing transmission. "Can I do anything?" I asked one night. Dad glanced at me like he had just remembered I existed. "You're already doing plenty," he said, then added, "I need you to understand that your brothers had a hard break. We've got to rally." "I'm rallying," I said, but in the unspoken ledger, space had to be carved from somewhere, and it came for me. The attention, the money, the oxygen. I didn't resent Aiden. I resented the gravity that always pulled the house toward him. I left Ohio with a cardboard suitcase and a spot at the University of Texas at Austin, pieced together with merit aid and a hodgepodge of grants and work study. I chose Austin because it felt like a city mid-leap, messy, inventive, hungry. I waited tables at a taco joint off Guadalupe, coded between shifts, and slept like I was borrowing the night from someone else. When I called home, Mom told me about Aiden's physical therapy milestones and Dad's new tire supplier, whose prices were highway robbery unless he ordered in bulk. They were proud of me in a way that sounded like nostalgia, as if my success was a story we would share during holidays, not an engine roaring under my feet. Sophomore year, I met Logan in a campus entrepreneurship seminar. He sat 2 rows back, handsome in that wholesome, square-shouldered way that suggests he never had to wonder if the game was rigged. He had a minor in marketing and a major in charisma. After class, he stopped me on the stairs. "That thing you said about mapping consumer behavior without creepiness," he said, "that's the future. I'd invest in you." "You have $20? I joked. He grinned. I have coffee. He always had coffee. Logan didn't look like danger. He looked like stability, a partner who wouldn't flinch at my ambition because he had his own. We dated. We studied. He heard me mutter for weeks about an idea for a simple CRM that small businesses could actually afford and understood my frustration when tools promise the moon and deliver migraines. He'd bring me a foam container of queso while I hammered out user flows on notebook paper. You're the engine, he'd say. I'm the PR. It felt like a promise we were making to the future. When I finally told my parents I wanted to start something, Dad's reaction was pragmatic. Don't sign anything you haven't read, he said. Mom worried about insurance and healthcare. Aiden told me to enjoy the hobby and sent a link to a job opening at a bank where a friend's cousin worked. I thanked him and saved the link like you save a life jacket under the bed. What I don't say often because it feels both petty and true is that my drive sharpened in the shadow of being overlooked. Every time a teacher handed out a team assignment and the boys reached over me to grab the mouse, I filed away their names with a quiet promise that I built something they couldn't ignore. Every time Mom said, "We'll do your thing next," and then never did, I taught myself how to do the thing without waiting for permission. Unfairness isn't just a moment. It's a weather system you learn to read, to plan around, to use when the wind finally bends in your favor. The last Christmas before I graduated, I flew home with a used laptop, a prototype running on shaky rails, and a plan to rent a storage unit for servers if I could talk my way into discounted electricity. We ate ham at the fold-out table because Aunt Leah borrowed our dining set, and Aiden limped around cracking jokes about his surgical scars. After dinner, Dad handed out envelopes. In mine, a check for $200 and a handwritten note that said, "For your code things, love, Dad." In Aiden's, keys to the old shop truck. "Your sister needs the truck more than I do," I blurted before I could swallow it. Dad looked stung. "He can't ride that knee on a bus everywhere," he said softly. I nodded. Of course he couldn't. Of course. I folded the note and tucked it into my wallet. I still have it, creased and frayed. When I'm feeling magnanimous, I tell myself the note meant more than the keys. Some nights, I am not magnanimous. Back in Austin, I doubled my shifts, hoarded tips, and drew wireframes on the backs of receipt rolls. Logan and I started talking about leases and ring sizes. He asked, "Will you always work this much?" And I said, "Only until it works." And he laughed like that was endearing rather than a warning. If there's one thread that runs through those years, it's that I learned to bet on myself because waiting for fairness was a slower death than failure. The ground under me was never level. I learned to run anyway, to find traction where the dirt slid, to keep my eyes on the line I drew for myself when nobody else saw it. Building something from scratch is not glamorous. It is not neon lights and TED Talks. It is ramen noodles eaten cold at midnight because you forgot the stove was broken. It is haggling with a landlord over an outlet that sparks, while praying the servers don't fry before morning. When Logan and I got married at 25, we didn't have much more than optimism and debt. He had a stable job at a Dallas marketing firm, while I was splitting myself in two, working full-time at a software company and pouring every ounce of energy into my CRM project on nights and weekends. At first, Logan was supportive. He'd stop by my desk at 2 a.m. with a mug of coffee and whisper, "You're going to change the world." I believed him. I wanted to, but belief doesn't pay bills, and every month the credit cards inched higher. The tipping point came when I pitched to 3 angel investors. All men, all older, all with the same questions. Will your husband manage the finances? Do you plan on having children? Why should we bet on you instead of someone steadier? They never said steadier meant male, but I heard it. When I walked out with 3 polite rejections, my chest burned with humiliation. Logan suggested maybe I find a male co-founder. I smiled and said I'd think about it, but inside, the fire doubled. If they thought I needed a man to validate my vision, then I would prove them wrong so loudly they'd choke on their doubt. So I cashed in my last 401k savings, and with trembling hands, I quit my steady job. I transformed our garage into an office. Cheap folding tables, hand-me-down monitors, and whiteboards I bought secondhand from Craigslist. I lived on adrenaline and microwaved burritos, coding 16-hour stretches until my knuckles cracked from typing. Logan's patience thinned. He wanted vacations, dinners, weekends off. I wanted survival. His career blossomed, promotions, bonuses, suits pressed by the dry cleaner, while mine crawled forward in increments. My victory was signing 3 small business clients who paid $50 a month. His victory was flying to Chicago to land a corporate account worth 6 figures. He smiled for photos. I hid behind glowing screens. Still, I didn't stop. I couldn't. I knocked on doors, cold-called boutiques, and begged mom-and-pop shops to try my software. I offered free trials, demoed in dusty backrooms, fixed bugs at 3 a.m. so a florist order system wouldn't crash before Valentine's Day. Each yes was oxygen. Each no was sand in my throat. When I finally hit 100 clients after a year, I wept in the bathroom, forehead pressed to cool tile. 100 people believed in me. That was 100 more than the investors who had laughed me out of their glass towers. But success always came with a cost. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I missed sleep. Logan's patience eroded into resentment. "You're married to that company," he snapped one night. "Do you even remember what we looked like together?" I did. I remembered the engagement photos, the promise of building something side by side. But reality was lonelier. He was moving up while I was clawing upward. Nails broken, hands raw. By year 3, the company was profitable. I had 15 employees and an office that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink. We celebrated hitting a $1 million valuation with a store-bought cake. Logan didn't come. He had work. That night, alone in the office, I stared at the city skyline and whispered, "We did it." The we meant me and the people who had chosen to believe. Logan, meanwhile, was already drifting. He wanted credit for my grind, but none of the sweat. He started talking about our company in front of his friends, as though his late-night coffee runs had written a single line of code. I bit my tongue until it bled. The harder I worked, the further apart we grew. My sacrifices stacked. My health, my marriage, my 20s. I traded them all for a shot at proving that I was enough. That a girl from Dayton with solder burns on her wrists could build something no one could take away. Or so I thought. By the time my company reached a valuation of $50 million, I thought I had weathered the worst storms. Divorce papers were signed, assets divided, and Logan had walked out of my life with his designer suits and his new companion, Vanessa, a marketing director he'd met at his firm. It stung, of course, but I told myself it was better this way. I had my company, my vision, my people. For a while, the silence was golden. My team grew, our software won contracts with regional retailers, and my calendar filled with conferences instead of couples therapy. I slept less but smiled more, convinced the past was finished with me. Then the cracks began. It started with strange emails to my board members, unsigned but hinting at hidden truths about my company's origin. A week later, Vanessa left me a voicemail that dripped with menace. "You build it on lies. Don't think we won't prove it." I ignored her, certain it was bitterness talking. But bitterness has teeth when it's desperate. The real ambush came on a Tuesday morning board meeting. We were hosting 6 international investors from New York, London, and Singapore. The agenda was clear. Finalize a deal that would push us into European markets and potentially double our valuation. We rehearsed for weeks. Every slide was polished, every number airtight. At 8:55 a.m., everyone was seated in our glass-wall conference room overlooking downtown Austin. I adjusted the mic, ready to open with a welcome. The investors leaned forward, pens poised, coffee steaming. And then the doors slammed open. Vanessa strode in first, draped in a blood-red suit, her heels striking like gunfire on the tile. Behind her came Logan, pale but determined, carrying a leather folder. The air snapped taut. Conversations stopped mid-breath. "Sorry to interrupt," Vanessa said, though her smile was triumphant, not apologetic. "But we're here to claim what belongs to us." Gasps rippled around the table. My CFO half rose, ready to call security, but I lifted a hand. "Let's hear them out," I said evenly. "Sometimes people hang themselves with enough rope." Vanessa slapped her folder on the table and fanned out documents, bank statements, old emails, photographs of our garage startup. This company exists because of Logan, she declared. He financed Rachel's little hobby until it became an empire. His business expertise guided her. And we're here for our rightful 50%. Logan nodded stiffly, eyes darting between me and the stunned investors. Inside, my pulse thundered. Outwardly, I smiled. That's a bold claim, I said. Unfortunately for you, the divorce settlement was crystal clear. This company is mine. Vanessa's face flushed. You'll regret dismissing us. The truth always comes out. I glanced at the investors. They looked rattled, whispering among themselves. The entire expansion deal, the future of my company, was in jeopardy. Security, I said calmly. 2 guards entered, flanking the intruders. Vanessa shrieked, "This isn't over," as they were escorted out, her voice echoing down the hallway. Logan looked back once, eyes hollow, before vanishing behind the closing doors. I turned to the room, breath steady despite the rage clawing at my chest. My apologies. Divorce is messy, but legally, ownership is not disputed. If anyone would like to review the court documents, my counsel will provide them immediately. Shall we continue? We salvaged the meeting, but the tension lingered like smoke. Only 4 of the 6 investors signed that day. I thought that humiliation was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I was jolted awake by a phone call at 6:15 a.m. It was Vanessa. Her voice was calm, almost gleeful. "We burned your company down. Good luck with your investors now." My heart stopped. I bolted upright, dialing 911 with shaking fingers, already pulling on clothes. The dispatcher confirmed fire crews were en route. I sped through dawn-quiet streets, headlights carving panic into the dark. When I reached our downtown headquarters, the building stood intact. No smoke, no flames. Relief slammed into me, so hard I nearly collapsed. Had Vanessa lied? Then my facilities manager called. "Rachel, the fire's at the old garage office. The original building." I whipped my car around, tires screeching. The closer I got, the thicker the plume of smoke rising against the morning sky. Fire trucks lined the street, hoses snaking across asphalt, water hissing against orange flames devouring the structure where my dream had begun. The sight gutted me. That garage was more than wood and drywall. It was my first late nights, my first victories, the cradle of everything. Watching it collapse under black smoke felt like watching my own body burn. Detective Rodriguez introduced himself at the scene. "Miss Carter, do you know who might want to do this?" "Yes," I said, voice hoarse. "My ex-husband and his new wife." Officers found an abandoned silver sedan, registered to Logan Park nearby, with empty gasoline cans dumped in the bushes. Vanessa's expensive perfume clung to the containers. Surveillance footage from a neighboring shop later confirmed it. Logan and Vanessa, sneaking in at 3 a.m., carrying fuel, fleeing 40 minutes later. They wanted to erase my origin story, to torch my legacy, and spook my investors into running. Instead, they handed me proof of their crimes. The climax sharpened at our company's charity gala 2 weeks later. I had leaked word of the event, knowing Vanessa couldn't resist a public stage. Security was heavy, cameras everywhere. Midway through dinner, I saw them. Vanessa in another striking red dress, Logan trailing like a shadow. They weren't on the guest list, but we let them in. At 9:30, I took the stage. I spoke about our foundation for women in tech, about resilience, about vision. Then I paused. "I also want to address something personal," I said. The room stilled. "My ex-husband and his wife are here tonight, though uninvited. Perhaps they'd like to explain why they set fire to my company's first office." Gasps erupted. Vanessa shot to her feet, denying everything. But on the screen behind me, surveillance footage rolled. Her and Logan carrying gas cans, their car pulling away. Vanessa shrieked. Logan crumbled. "It was her idea," he blurted. "I never wanted to. Rachel built this company herself. I had nothing to do with it." The room erupted again as police officers stepped forward, reading them their rights. Vanessa lunged, screaming, but was dragged away. Cameras captured every second. That night, in front of clients, investors, and employees, The truth was carved in stone. My company was mine, and their desperate grasp for it had destroyed them instead. And yet, as I stood on that stage, applause washing over me, I felt no triumph, only exhaustion, and the faint chill of knowing this war wasn't finished. Because sometimes, the worst battles begin right after you think you've won. The night after the gala, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off, staring at the Austin skyline. The city glittered like nothing had happened, traffic moving, bars spilling laughter onto the streets. But inside me, the silence roared. I should have felt victorious. My enemies were humiliated, exposed in front of hundreds of witnesses, hauled away in handcuffs. Investors shook my hand, employees hugged me, and the papers already framed it as a story of resilience. But my chest was hollow. When you pour your soul into building something, every attack feels personal. They hadn't just tried to steal my company, they had tried to erase me. The old garage where I wrote my first lines of code was now a pile of ashes. My marriage had been reduced to courtroom transcripts and public betrayals. And despite standing tall on stage, inside, I felt small, like the little girl in Dayton, clutching a soldering iron and begging for someone to take her seriously. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames licking at the garage walls, heard Vanessa's mocking voice. "We burned your company down." My mind replayed the humiliation of the boardroom, the way investors' eyes had flickered with doubt. What if they still believed her? What if the seeds of suspicion grew no matter how many court rulings or confessions proved the truth? The betrayal carved deeper than any business loss. Logan had once been the man who said, "I was changing the world." Now, he had stood by while his new wife tried to set it on fire. I kept asking myself, was it greed or was it hate? Which was worse, that he wanted my success, or that he wanted to watch me fail? I walked through my apartment barefoot, restless, touching surfaces as if to remind myself I was still here, still real. The floor was cool under my feet, the glass of water sweat against my palm, but my thoughts ran darker. If my life's work could be torched overnight, what else could they take? My safety? My future? The loneliness pressed hardest. Success had filled my calendar but emptied my personal life. My parents were aging back in Ohio, my brother lost in his own battles, my friends reduced to text threads I barely answered. And now my ex-husband's betrayal was splashed across headlines, my private pain dissected by strangers. People clapped for my strength, but none of them had to lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering if the next attack would be worse. For the first time, I questioned whether it was worth it. The years of sacrifice, the missed birthdays, the endless hustle. Had I traded too much? What good was a $100 million company if it left me standing in the ashes of my own history, shaking and sleepless? I thought about quitting, selling, walking away before they could take more. The idea startled me, but lingered like a whisper. You don't have to keep fighting. You can stop now. And then came the guilt. My employees had risked their own stability to follow me. Clients trusted my software to keep their livelihoods afloat. To walk away now would betray them all. The weight of responsibility crushed down, heavy and merciless. Tears finally came, hot and unrelenting. Not the neat tears of a businesswoman in a movie, but the ugly kind that leave you gasping for air. I cried for the garage, for the years wasted on a man who turned against me, for the endless proving that never seemed enough. And in that raw despair, a thought began to take shape, not of surrender, but of resolve. If they wanted to break me, they have to try harder. Because though the fire had burned my past, it hadn't touched my future. I wiped my face, poured another glass of water, and stood straighter. My pain was real, but so was my rage. And rage, if harnessed, could be a weapon sharper than any knife. The game wasn't over. Not yet. The morning after my breakdown, I woke up with swollen eyes but a sharpened focus. Vanessa and Logan had tried to torch my company into submission. Instead, they handed me the perfect opportunity to end their war once and for all. The first step was legal. My attorneys filed restraining orders, criminal complaints, and civil suits. But I knew that paper alone wouldn't stop people this desperate. Vanessa thrived on chaos, and Logan followed her like a moth circling a flame. I needed something more, something permanent. That's when my legal chief, Sarah, found a gold mine. Buried in old investor agreements was a spousal consent form Logan had signed years earlier, explicitly waiving any claim to the company. He hadn't read it carefully, just scribbled his name in annoyance back when we were still married. Combined with old emails where he admitted I built the company alone, the case against him was airtight. But here's the twist neither of them saw coming. I wasn't just defending my company anymore. I was turning the tables. I hired a private investigator to dig into their finances. What surfaced was worse than I imagined. They were drowning in debt, lavish vacations, luxury cars, a mortgage they couldn't afford. Bankruptcy loomed. That desperation explained the arson, the boardroom theatrics, the late-night threats. But it also gave me leverage. With the evidence of their crimes and their financial ruin, my team built a strategy. Trapped them in their own hubris. And the perfect trap was already scheduled, the charity gala. We leaked just enough whispers through mutual contacts to guarantee they'd show. Security cameras were hidden, plainclothes guards stationed, and the DA's office on standby. When I revealed the footage of them carrying gasoline cans, it wasn't just about humiliating them. It was about putting them on record, in front of hundreds, with nowhere to run. And it worked. Logan cracked first. His confession: Rachel built this company herself. I never contributed anything. The fire was her idea. Wasn't rehearsed, but it sealed everything. Vanessa's fury turned on him instantly, shrieking that he was weak, that he'd ruined their chance. Police stepped in, cameras flashed, and for once, I didn't have to prove anything. They proved it themselves. But revenge wasn't just in the public takedown. It was in what came after. Within weeks, Logan struck a plea deal. 5 years in prison with parole possible after 3, in exchange for full cooperation against Vanessa. He sat in a courtroom, pale and trembling, admitting his guilt while testifying to hers. Vanessa, furious and unrepentant, refused any deal. She went to trial, still insisting she deserved half my empire. The jury deliberated for less than a day. She was sentenced to 12 years for arson, conspiracy, and attempted extortion. Yet the second twist was more personal. During discovery, investigators uncovered evidence Vanessa had been scheming long before she even met Logan. She had a history of targeting wealthy or ambitious men, manipulating them, and then going after their assets when things soured. Logan wasn't her partner. He was her pawn. My stomach turned when I read the files, realizing she'd studied me before she ever laid eyes on him, researching my company, my background, my weaknesses. She hadn't just wanted Logan. She wanted me. That revelation, oddly, was freeing. Logan's betrayal wasn't proof that I was unlovable or unworthy. He had been weaponized by someone who saw me as prey. That didn't excuse him, but it reframed the story. I hadn't been defeated by a failed marriage. I'd been targeted by a predator who underestimated my resilience. In the aftermath, I refused to let the story end with destruction. The garage, once a smoldering ruin, was rebuilt into something greater. The Origin Lab, a hybrid museum and innovation center for my company. Employees worked on experimental projects there, while visitors walked through exhibits, showing our scrappy beginnings. The very place Vanessa tried to erase became the monument to our endurance. And here's the final twist. The entire ordeal didn't weaken my company. It strengthened it. Investors who had once hesitated doubled down, impressed by our resilience. Employees felt a renewed loyalty, knowing we had survived fire and betrayal together. Within 2 years, our valuation soared to $250 million. Vanessa thought she could burn down my story. Instead, she etched me into legend. Logan thought he could ride my coattails to wealth. Instead, he left in shackles, muttering apologies to a judge who didn't care. And me? I discovered that revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes it's about standing tall, while the people who tried to destroy you collapse under the weight of their own schemes. Yes, I pursued justice in court. Yes, I rebuilt what they burned. But the deepest revenge was simply this. I kept going. They wanted to define me by flames and failure. I chose to define myself by survival and triumph. And when the dust settled, I didn't just have a stronger company. I had a stronger self. Looking back now, I see the fire, the lawsuits, the betrayals for what they really were, tests. They pushed me to the edge of despair, stripped me of illusions, and forced me to decide whether I would be defined by what others try to take, or by what I chose to build. I chose to build. The old garage may be ashes, but the Origin Lab stands as proof that what burns can also be reborn stronger. My company is thriving, my team is loyal, and my future belongs to me alone. Logan and Vanessa are gone from my life, leaving only the lesson that resilience is the sharpest form of revenge. But I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe,